After doing so much time on watch, this 3 weeks back to the Blues territory is really nothing. It passes pretty quick, almost like a blink. Not to mention, you got the constant fold jumps we got to go through. I got to check equipment after that's done, make sure everything didn't overheat, overstress, make sure everything goes through its cooldown, its recharge, replace parts, standard PMCS, of course, and it keeps me busy. Of course, when I have my downtime, I can't help but laugh because my brain always goes to what Klaus told us about why we found them both in that pod, both wearing absolutely nothing. And of course, he was standing at attention even though he was passed out, which of course made us laugh, but at the time we were more worried about making sure he was still alive. Klaus told us that after the Battle of Sarish, he thought he was dead. He kind of drifted around and fell asleep in his suit. Then, for some reason, he found himself being pulled in. Some sort of tractor beam pulled him into what was left of one of the Blues ships. It wasn't pressure sealed by any stretch, at least at first, they thought. But turns out it was, and they could finally look at each other, which is probably the only reason he didn't blow her damn head off. I mean, seriously, she's too cute to blow her head off. Even I can see that. Yet eventually they found some sort of leftover civilian freighter that was out there. Thankfully, it had some sort of living quarters, and they were together for weeks, waiting for any type of rescue. During that time, they got close, and they got close over and over and over again. And that's how things went. Apparently, the system only had so much air, so much energy, so they had to ditch. And there was only one life pod, so they did what they did. And now, here they are, inside another life pod together, and I swear they were both laughing. I know she was giggling a little bit as she climbed on top of him. Seriously, I know you have to be without clothing, but did she have to really do that wiggle with her butt like that? Seriously, Klaus, you lucky son of a bitch. Eventually, after many jumps in that 3 long weeks, even though it passed fairly quick, at the time it does take its toll. We finally got to Blue Territory. And I was absolutely amazed as we finally jumped in and I could tell everybody to come out of their cryosleep. I said, hey, guess what? We got more than just blue ships waiting for us. We got humans here too. I'm sure that surprised the crap out of them over the intercoms, but at that point, I suddenly realized, yeah, they're not even close to fully awake yet, so I doubt they're going to give a shit. When we actually pulled up towards the planet, we were absolutely amazed. There was a full military honors parade set up as the ships were aligning towards the side. And as we looked down towards the planet, it seems there was a huge party going on. Wow, these two, hell, they made a splash, even though the Blues don't even know who it is yet. I guess getting one of theirs back after so many centuries is kind of a big deal. Well, who am I to say anything? It always is a big deal. To make a statement, we didn't actually mention Grace's name, her real name, until we actually got onto the planet. And, she said she wanted it to be a surprise. Sneaky girl. As we got close, I could see the Blues' homeworld called Lica. It's a very, very colorful planet. Holy crap. It's like somebody took a rainbow, ate it, and then puked it all over this ball. There's pastel colors all over the place. Flowing rivers that are so unbelievably clear that you can see the fish all the way to the bottom. And of course, massive crystal clear lakes. I was here once before, and I remember the clean air, and I tried to take a deep breath, and then I started to cough at the recycled crap that we're breathing in right now. But as I looked down, all I could see was, by all accounts, by my reckoning at least, a paradise world. On that world, there was only 2 issues. That was the occasional seismic activity that could be absolutely devastating, similar to earthquakes on Earth, but in their case, since they're so fragile, it can be a whole lot worse. A tree falls on them, And even if it's a small branch, it could break a major bone, which is bad. There's also a single predator to the blues, and looking at it, it's basically just a giant snake. Really decorative, too, with these weird fins that kind of like spread out. I always did wonder if the damn thing slithered underwater, too. But then again, I don't know. You can see all the way down, and this thing is, well, it blends in really well. I mean, it's green, brown, red, and yellow, all sorts of weird patterns, so it mixes in with the foliage pretty well. The only thing is, something that surprised the blues when I was there, is we could always go, there's one right there, and point it out, even if that thing was perfectly still. If it was moving the least little bit, that snake was dinner. I remember putting a last bolt right through one of their heads, and actually getting a standing ovation from the blues on the ground. And I'll tell you what, didn't want to waste it. Anything I shoot, I eat. And that snake, well, I guess the pastel colors were actually showing because it was a bit fruity. The crew had fully defrosted, so to speak, and was finally up in the bridge as we descended down towards the landing area. And we could see there was a crowd gathering all over the place. When we landed, as the doors actually opened, a few folks rushed in. We had actually asked for certain clothing, if at all possible, and it was waiting for us. They brought it on board, and everyone simply had to wait for a little while. Klaus, as I looked, was in full military Class A dress uniform with all his decorations, bells and whistles, and whatever else shit you got. Grace was in a nearly sheer white dress. I still had to remind myself that modesty is hardly a thing when it comes to the blues, which, has made some issues, but we digress. On the platform, military humans on one side lined up in formation and simply stood there at attention, not moving even a centimeter, not even looking around as they stared forward. Many of the blues found this a bit unsettling, but they realized this is the way we showed our respects. The blues on the other side had their honor guard, and to my surprise, the queen and her advisors were actually there. This was a bigger deal than I thought. We exited first before Klaus and Grace. We immediately moved off to the side as we got a couple handshakes and a little bit of an attaboy. But when the couple came down, you would swear they had just got married. As he was in his uniform, she was tucked onto his arm, and he was walking with that practiced drill walk that all military guys actually have. The moment, I've got to say, I'm glad they got it recorded because that was really nice to see. Especially since the mood was a little bit ruined the moment Grace's feet touched the ground. Then I heard in her own language someone yell, "Sister!" And a blue, foregoing any type of ceremony, burst out of the formation and ran up to Grace and squeezed her so hard and lifted her up, I thought I was going to hear bones crack, but nope. And one could say, the moment might be ruined, but I'm not one of them at this point. As they held each other for the first time in Lord knows how long exactly. Tears rolled down their faces as they spoke with each other, and I'll admit I got a little choked up. I turned to the other side, and I could see that the fleet admiral had actually showed up to welcome Klaus back himself. Before Klaus was even over to the side, a man walked to either side of him, and I could see that one was holding a folder. I was like, what the hell is going on here? Klaus was being brought up in front of the formation where everybody stood at parade rest, and before we realized what was going on, we heard one of them say, "Attention to orders!" Everyone immediately snapped to attention at that point, including myself. We watched as Klaus was actually promoted from the NCO that he was to a lieutenant right there. The men on each side even removed his stripes that he, for some reason, didn't realize were very loosely put on, and then put the bars on his shoulder. The admiral said something to him at that point. I was too far away to hear what he said, but the look on Klaus's face said it all. And also, the look on the admiral's face definitely told me everything. He had just informed the Admiral that the slight rumor that was bouncing around that he had knocked up Grace was absolutely true. The Admiral was shocked, surprised, and then shook Klaus's hands. This was a normal thing, of course, for us humans to simply congratulate each other. Then the Fleet Admiral turned, put his arm around Klaus, and kind of showed him to everybody else, and said, not just as he returned, but he's also going to be a father. And with that, everybody simultaneously went, hooah! And then everyone cheered and went up and shook his hand, congratulating him. Ever since our improvements, the amount of children being born is very low. And the fact that no blue has ever been impregnated by a human, this was a big, big deal. I looked back over towards Grace, and when I looked, she was already kneeling before the Queen. The Queen motioned and said something, and then we saw Grace stand up. And she must have told the Queen that she was expecting at that point, because the Queen had a look of confusion, fear, almost contempt, and then overall joy. The last one took over as she saw how happy Grace is, as she looked over toward Klaus, and the fact that Klaus is being congratulated for being a father now. She realized this was actually a good thing, even though this would be the first time in all of history. After all that excitement on the platform, the party moved to the massive banquet hall, and I remember this place. Whew! I swear you could park probably 24 fighters in here and still have enough room for their crews to sleep. It's crazy. Though this time it wasn't the size of the hall that overwhelmed my senses. It was the smell of all the food they had prepared, and we were able to eat like kings, true kings. Anything we wanted was being brought before us. I don't want to be picky. I just grabbed whatever was in front of me and started chowing down. This will be the first time I actually had fresh food in, oh God, what, few decades now. And it was beyond enjoyable. Oh boy. The beautiful women around also helped with the ambiance. Once my stomach started getting full, believe me, my eyes were actually filling in their version of a stomach as well. As I'm taking in the sights, I realized that a few of the soldiers and sailors are actually trying to hit on the lovely blue ladies that are in front of them. And I actually started chuckling, trying not to choke on my own food, because I remember when I was here before, I basically did the same thing. And I could only hear one that might have made any type of impression. He looked at her, and he was so unbelievably polite. And when she asked, when he got his food, if he needed anything else, he simply asked, "Can I get a hug?" She looked a little lost for a second, didn't know what that was. Then he said, "Oh, that's fine, I'll show you." He simply stood up, which surprised her as he was quite large compared to her. Then he told her to open her arms as he spread his arms as well. And as soon as she did, he stepped forward and slowly brought his hands around her back. She realized what was going on, or maybe he whispered in her ear, I don't know, but then she closed her arms around him and they squeezed just a little bit, and all I could think is, dude, don't overdo it, don't overdo it, don't overdo it. I could see his lips moving a little bit as he said something into her ear that made her blush. When they finally let go, all I could think was, dude. I mean, besides the fact that it was a taboo last time I was here, I'm pretty sure those two either spent the night together or really, really wanted to. I also watched Klaus and Grace wait up at the front table, the place of honor, and they ate and drank like a newlywed couple. There's no other way to put it. However, when Grace actually tried to grab any type of alcohol, Klaus was really fast to stop her, saying it wasn't good for the baby. I thought this was absolutely hilarious, but Grace actually turned and looked towards us, and she said, "Is it really not good for the child?" And every single human with the earshot said, "No, it's not good." She didn't understand what they were saying until it was translated, of course, but she got the message very loud and clear. I enjoyed the show, watching them be together. I mean, the only thing is, even though I was happy for them, I knew I probably wouldn't ever see them again in my time. I mean, I have all the time in the universe now, but the fact of the matter is, now that we're a spacefaring race and we're spread out so far, we don't see people all that much unless we're, close to them for one reason or another. Speaking of which, I turned and looked at the rest of the crew, and most of them were simply shoving food into their mouth just about as fast as possible. And boy, was it a sight to see. Honestly, as small as Luke is, I don't think he could fit that much mass inside his body. Eventually, though, I had my fill, and I needed to get up. I need some fresh air. Though this party was great and all, large crowds aren't really my thing. They never really were. When I got outside, I remembered I was in one of the same places I was last time I was here. I breathed in the cool, crisp air. It was so nice to have air that wasn't recycled for once. As I enjoyed the night and looked up at the triple moons that were out there, all of which were a different color, red, green, and blue, I heard a voice behind me. Of all the ships in the universe, you had to be the one to find her. I spun around and I saw a familiar voice. You're looking stunning tonight, Tori. She kind of gave me a sideward glance and said, I look the same I have for a long time, but I appreciate the compliment. Your body seems to be holding well, also. Thank you, I said, though I'm not used to being in a suit like this, as I said as I'm actually pulling at my tie. She raised her hand, tries to get me to stop. Perhaps you should wear your uniform again, she said. It always did look good on you. I turned away and released my grip on the tie, turning back to the side and looking up towards the sky. I simply said, You know why I don't ever put that on again. At that point, she stepped in close and got so close that I could actually feel her body just push a little bit against my sleeve. She then said, I was hoping you had pushed that into your past. I grinned a little bit and lowered my head before saying, It's always good to remember where you've been and what you've done. That way, you never forget who you are. I wasn't looking at her, but I swear she grinned a little bit when she said, Good. At least I know you won't forget me. She then leans into my shoulder. I then said, I couldn't forget you if I tried, moving my hand around the back and grabbing her shoulder and pulling her in close to me. There was a pause in the conversation as we both just stayed in that moment. Then she spoke. So the human you saved impregnated my aunt? She looked up at me, and I looked at her for a second before looking back and saying, Is that going to be an issue? She responded with, Maybe it would have been once, but probably not now, not anymore. I then said, So, things have changed a bit around here. Good to know, as I squeezed her shoulder just a little bit. She then said, I do not know if it is good or not yet. Trying to think about it, I said, Well, we'll know soon enough. And then there was a pause again. I wanted to stay in that moment with her next to me as my hand felt that flawless skin on her arm. It was all I could do not to caress her shoulder. Boy, being a human can be tough when you got something this attractive right next to you. The celebration itself for the two coming back continued for 2 more planetary rotations, in other words, 2 more days, and by the end, even the soldiers and sailors were completely partied out, and that's something that's hard to do. As they get ready to leave, me and the rest of the crew were brought before the Queen. The queen looks at us and is surprised that we're not taking a knee, but then she remembers that for us humans, bending the knee is a sign of submission, and we don't do that. We stood there, silent, simply waiting, not showing any aggressive posture at all. She then spoke. In honor of your service and bringing back one of our family we believed lost for so long, we offer you a token of appreciation. State your desire, and if it is within our abilities, it shall be granted. For a moment, we look at each other, not realizing what we should ask for, and Luke actually spoke up first. You have been very kind to us already, yet we must go back and continue our search for others and other parts of things. We must go to our job, but if at all possible, could we receive additional provisions and potentially upgrades to our vessel? That would help us greatly. As the queen smiled at the way he put things, I was trying not to laugh because I'm like, when the hell did you talk like that, dude? I thought this as I didn't turn away from the queen's smile that seemed to be very genuine, yet was getting wider and wider as it seemed she remembered that the thirst for riches has been made moot centuries ago, as a device called compilers became a thing. With them, any refined resource can be produced, at least a non-biological, so you could make gold, silver, palladium, whatever the hell you want. However, then you have to attach it to an automated design and construction piece of equipment, and it's very easy to get anything you want as long as you have certain equipment, which even a child knows how to make nowadays. It should be a note, though, that some hands-on work may be required, but the parts that you're going to assemble with your hands can easily be made, which makes the whole human condition kind of weird nowadays. The queen finally spoke and said, "It shall be," as she turned towards one of her advisors, and the advisor simply nodded, giving an agreement that she can take care of it. The queen then turned back to us and looked Linda right in the eye. Linda thought for just barely a second. Maybe she had already figured out what she wanted to say. And then she said, "Since food is covered, I would simply desire some fitted clothing. Some of the beautiful dresses, shoes, and headgear that are here it's all of quality and beauty you can't find anywhere else. This is my desire." "So be it," the queen said, without any hesitation, and motioned to a separate one of the advisors, who stepped forward. The queen simply stated after that, "She will take you shopping." I was actually put back a little bit by such a human phrase coming out of the queen's mouth, but I also had to try not to chuckle, as Lydia seemed almost giddy at this whole idea of clothes, shoes, and everything she could ever want, even for her very tall figure. Hell, I'm pretty sure if we weren't in some sort of ceremony, she would have jumped for joy quite literally at that point. When the queen turned her head and then asked, "And what is your desire?" It was as though she addressed Jane and myself at the same time. I don't know which one of us she was looking at, but Jane definitely beat me to the punch. She just about stepped forward when she said, "I would like to be sent to the breeding pit." This made us all turn and look at her with a "what the fuck" look. We all knew what that was. We as humans call it the breeding pit, as it's a slang term for the holding area for the blue males. This was a highly, highly protected area because so few blue males are actually born. Normally, a female that's sent in there, she's ready to reproduce, and she's there, and the males do what they are born to do, and that is breed. Constantly, sun up to sundown, and sometimes beyond that. Normally, a female that goes down there would spend a few days and is sent away by the males once she's pregnant. There's some sort of chemical signal there that the other females can't figure out, but apparently the blue males can. If a human female can't be impregnated by any of blue males, then by that, she will not have to leave until she actually wants to. The queen is actually surprised and a bit disgusted as we could see her eyes look up and down Jane's body, but began to giggle along with the rest of the court. Seems like no matter where we go, girls are girls, as they are realizing that Jane is going to end up so stuffed full of cream pies that her name might have to be changed to Little Debbie. The queen composed herself and then said, "Are you certain?" Realizing that a human female like Jane will continually be filled in every orifice, to include even her oral face, every single day for this foreseeable future. And since we've all been enhanced, that's a long time. And there's no days of rest and recover except that one time during that planet's year when the males go through their rest cycle, which is kind of like hibernation. The thing is, if they've produced enough offspring, they don't wake up from this and their bodies are simply chucked. Even with this understanding, Jane's answer to the queen's question was simply, "Yes, please." The queen said, "Then it shall be." Jane was so giddy she actually skipped away, following one of the court security as she left the room. It seemed as though the queen wanted to get her out of there as soon as possible. The queen then turned to me. "As for you, what do you desire?" she asked. I thought for a moment and said, "Well, now that my crew is short-handed by 25%, I'm going to need a replacement." The queen then kind of was pulled back a little bit, as she did not seem to like where I was going. She said, "I'm not willing to force one of my own people to travel with humans. If one were to volunteer, perhaps, then..." I cut in and said, "I have an idea who may be willing to join us." The queen at that point and everyone else was slightly intrigued. 4 days later, I'm back aboard ship, checking all the systems. And the upgrades are working out so much better than I expected. Holy crap, the startup is just not even half of what it was. The engines are running even better. This is absolutely great. Luke is so happy with the situation, he's actually whistling right now with all the new foodstuffs that are crammed in every possible corner. The provisions are now going to be much, much tastier, but I know that's not exactly what he's looking at. Certain vegetables and fruits on this planet make some of the best liquor you are ever going to taste, and I know that's exactly what he's going to be doing. I have a feeling if I end up at the rotation after him, I'm going to have to clean up the still and probably a lot of vomit. Linda, on the other hand, is smiling wide as she feels that new shawl that's around her neck. She can't wear any of the other stuff because she's working and she'll damage it. But her quarters have two very large trunks full of brand new clothes. And if I know anything about the clothing that comes here, it is very soft, very strong, and also very revealing. I figure she'll be much more comfortable actually wearing it during her watch and not while any of else are up. As Linda put it, the clothes the Blues make just make me feel good and sexy. I had just finished the main power-up when I heard a voice cut through the hallways. "Everything is prepared on my end." Turning around to look, I said, "It sure is." My eyes immediately going down and seeing Tori's cute little blue butt sticking out the bottom of that dress. I swear they make all their clothes too small for this. Then I said, "All right, everybody strap in." Everybody moves over to the bridge as we strap in for takeoff. The takeoff and landing can be a little bumpy at times, so everyone has to still strap in. Just a heads up, when we get up to our position, Tori and I will be taking first watch. Linda smirked, and Luke actually said, "Got it. Just don't eat all the good stuff." I responded with interesting choice of words. Luke looked at me and said, "Why is that?" as he clicked in. I responded, "My plan is I'm going to be eating a lot. Before he said anything, I hit the boosters, and up we went. The liftoff was a little shaky, which immediately got everybody's attention as they were quiet, just waiting to see if anything would go wrong. But once we got the landing gear up, we were off towards the outer atmosphere. Once we got outside the gravity well, we found a surprise. Several human military ships were actually lined up to escort us and give us a send-off. They had downturned a lot of their las cannons so they could actually use them as a salute, kind of a laser light show in space. Now that we're free of the gravity well, Luke and Linda can head to their stasis pods. Once they're gone, Tori looks around and realizes there's not much going on. She asks, "How are we going to keep ourselves occupied while we continue the search for strays and anything else we might find? It sounds as though this watch is going to be boring as hell." I responded, "Don't worry. I think we can find something to occupy ourselves. That is, if you think you can handle it." She looked at me sideways. "I can handle anything you can give me." I simply said, "That's my girl." It was actually really busy for us during our constant jumps back to our sectors for searching. But once we finally got to our assigned sector, we would not be jumping for several weeks at a time. Now that we have some serious amount of downtime, all the time in the universe actually, I guess it's time to see if I can get to know my new crew mate. After putting on some music and then pulling Tori in close to dance with me, I made a mental note to send a thank you to Klaus and Grace. Thanks to them, my watch is going to be many things. Boring is not one of them. Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me on the final chapter of this story. Before I go, I need to send out some quick thank yous to a few of my supporters, and those will be Erica Gem, Black Trapper, MTF Guard, SS Demon, Guardian Sage, Kyle's Len, Sir, and Chris Dixon. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I will see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.